Hi, I'm Tim Januszewski and from Camarillo, California.
Hi, I'm Sam, and I'm originally from California, Ventura County.
My grandma is Catholic, so I grew up in the Catholic Church, went through my baptism when I was just a small baby. They baptized me in a bowl of holy water, went through confirmation as a young adult, passed confirmation. I grew up in a very, very conservative Catholic household.
I grew up in the church. My mom and dad had us at a local Christian church in Ventura. Growing up, it was my stepdad used to talk in tongues and be slain in the spirit, so it was pretty I don't know what the word is, just pretty exciting in my house growing up. We met at our church, Ventura Missionary in Ventura, and actually Tim and I were newly sober, and Tim was there with his rehab center because the guys would go there and volunteer their time at the church, and I knew Tim's mom, so we would go to church together, and that's how Tim and I met. It was at Ventura Missionary in 2009.
I think that was the highlight. I mean, growing up or in our rehab at Casa de Vida, every Sunday we'd get a chance to go out and serve at the church. So it was just a really good time to be able to get out there and not only go to church, but also we did many things at the church. The men's dinners, and we cleaned up around the campus and just did a lot. So that was a highlight. And then obviously seeing my mom and my family and Samantha.
Meeting me.
Yeah, meeting you was a highlight. So
I was delivered from a heroin addiction and a meth addiction February 11th, 2009. Tim's sobriety date is June 13th, 2009. So we didn't actually know each other the day that we got sober, but we met in probably December of 2009. So we were already just a few months sober by the time that we met. So we were already kind of on that same journey. So it's kind of neat because now every year, I just celebrated 15 years of sobriety in February, and then Tim's celebrated his 15 years just barely in June.
Yeah, and so my story, getting to that point, it was a crazy story. It was kind of like a God moment because a lot of my family had been praying, and I was obviously, I've been delivered from a heroin addiction and a lot of other addictions, chemical, prescription medication. And it was crazy because on that day, June 13th, I decided to go into a grocery store and steal a piece of meat. And ironically enough, I got caught in the parking lot, and that's what catapulted me into the life that I live today. So I just believe that God was just snatching me up because I had a lot of friends there with me, and they were all gone, and I was left in the parking lot with the security guard. But that day, I don't know, it just rings for me because that was the first day of my new life, and I feel like a lot of answered prayers were answered that day because that catapulted me into, recovery and obviously meeting Samantha and then us having the life we did today. Oh, and becoming a Christian, because I went to a Christian recovery home. So that was kind of new as well, because obviously I said I grew up in a Catholic household. So when I stepped into the Christian recovery home, I was already familiar with, Bible study, getting up and praying. So all that stuff came easy to me, but I felt really a sense, I felt like the hole in my heart was filled with Christianity and God because I fell into that so easily. So it was easy to, I think, make that transition from a Catholic church into a Christian church where the music, everything was just so relaxed and so loving, and I felt like I could be myself, and I felt very loved, not only in the rehab facility, but at the church as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think the same for me too. When I decided, well, I didn't really decide to get sober. I feel like I had this moment on that day where I had a choice to make. And I believe that because my dad raised me up in the church, and I knew about the love of the Lord, and I knew that I could always cry out to him, I was able to do that in that moment. And I don't know where I would be today if I wouldn't have known about the love of Jesus. And so I'm so thankful that I was raised in the church and that I did know about God, because on that day I was, it was a turning point. I was either going to continue using and die, or I was going to cry out for help, and I was going to be saved. And that's exactly what happened. I'm just so grateful for God's grace. I left home when I was 16 years old. I just didn't like the rules. I didn't like the structure. Like I said, I was raised in a Christian home, so all the things that I wanted to do were not acceptable. And I have a very strong spirit. So at 16, I left. I stayed at various friends' houses, boyfriends' houses, drinking and drugging. It quieted who God created me to be. And I know that sounds terrible, but I didn't like who I was. I was just very self-conscious. I really cared about what people thought about me. And when I drank or when I did drugs, I didn't care about that stuff anymore. I could just be free from that feeling. And so I started drinking and doing drugs at an early age. And so smoking weed and taking pills kind of just started turning into more and more things. So it was whoever I was surrounding myself with. Everybody kind of just started doing more and more and more. And so before I knew it, I was about 17, maybe 18, and I was already doing heroin and finding myself in really awful situations, but completely in bondage. And I mean, really enjoying how I was feeling. I was feeling free in those moments. But progressively it got worse. And before I knew it, I was living on the streets and just doing things that I wouldn't be doing if I was sober. And that went on from 16 till about, I got sober when I was 28. And there were times when I wanted to, I tried to get sober, but then it was like, I would still keep drinking, or I don't know. I guess I just really thought that I could be, I don't know, maybe just do things on the weekends. I know it sounds crazy now, but it was just insanity, right?
We call that a normie.
Yeah, just insanity. I hit bottom. I hit bottom in 2009 for the first time in my drinking and drugging career. I was absolutely terrified to use. I was absolutely terrified to put a needle in my arm one more time. And that had never happened before. I'd never been scared. I was in a super seedy motel in a not so great area, and I was terrified. I was going to die, and I knew it. And there was a lot of spiritual warfare going on. There was a time where I know I remember what I remember, but I don't even know if what I remember was really happening. It was super dark. I was on the bathroom floor in the hotel, and I was so scared. And I just remember saying to God, either take me or save me, because I cannot, I can't go on like this. I didn't want to continue living the way I was living. And that was the first time that had ever happened to me. And immediately when I cried out, I started kind of getting these ideas of how to get out of there. And one thing led to another. Before I knew it, I was in an ambulance, and then I was in the hospital. And then I reached out to a sober living, and they took me, even though they didn't take people that were detoxing, they took me. So immediately when I released myself to the Lord, he showed up. And even after 15 years, he continues to show up. And it's literally just been one yes after another yes to him since giving my life to him that day on that bathroom floor. He saved me.
My story begins just your classic, middle school kid that grew up. I mean, my family is pretty normal, and then one day somebody, basically just your buddies are drinking and before a little party, and all of a sudden, you find yourself really drunk at one point, and that's where I found myself. I think it was about 8th grade, before a dance. Me and my friends decided to get drunk and ride our bikes to the dance, and that was the first encounter I had with alcohol. And then it just progressed from there, right? Like, we all think that it's not going to happen to us, it's not going to get any worse, but my story, it got worse. So, drinking led to me drinking more and stealing alcohol from my parents and my grandparents, and, then came weed, and now I was using marijuana and drinking and partying, and it was just a classic story. And then just what they say is, you are who you hang around. So I started hanging around people that were partying, and eventually one day I was with my friends, and we were just normally doing our normal thing, and one of my friends put some stuff on top of the weed, and he called it opium. And, it was like, wow, this is another great feeling, this big hole in my heart that is there, and I'm trying to fill it with all these different things. And, that's where my heroin addiction started, because that so-called opium that my friend gave me wasn't opium. It was actually black tar heroin. And I soon found out that that is a drug that you are not going to just stop, because I tried to stop, and I couldn't. I got really sick. And so that kickstarted my heroin addiction for like the next 5 years. It was pretty ugly. I lost a lot of relationships. I ruined my relationships with my grandparents. I stole from them. I was just turned into something that I wasn't. But it all started, and I just never thought that I wound up there. But I wound up there, and I was able to find a doctor that would help me get rid of that addiction, and because I was pretty much done. And so thank God I went to this doctor, and he prescribed me some medicine that would help me get off of it. And it took me about 4 months to feel normal, to come out of my house and actually be like, oh my gosh, like I'm a human. I feel like okay. So it was really bad, and I was really scared. But then, I think it was like 2 days later, I went golfing with some friends, and that kickstarted a meth addiction, which I had never even tried. So, it's just a classic story of you start with drinking, and you don't know that you have this addictive personality like I do. And that's all it took, man. So that was another couple years. I was addicted to meth for quite some time. And then just before I got in trouble in the parking lot, I had relapsed on heroin. I think that that's where God really intervened, because I was going to go back down and replay the past 5 years that I had worked so hard to get clean from. And I don't know if I would have made it out without the Lord snatching me up in that parking lot, because, being addicted to heroin again, I just don't think I would have made it. So I just praise the Lord that on that day, he was just like, nope, Tim, you're done, and so that's kind of how, that's a pretty fast version of how my story got to that point in that parking lot.
That day that I cried out to God, and I ended up leaving that hotel in an ambulance, and then being in the hospital, and then I ended up at a friend's house, and they were telling me like, well, you have to get into a sober living. I remember calling my dad, and my dad, they always used to tell me, you can come home no matter what. You can always come home. Like, please come home. And I would never come home. And I called my dad, and I was so sick. I was detoxing, and I was so sick. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what was happening. And I called my dad, and my dad said, no, you can't come home. Don't come home. And I know now that was the Lord, that was because I was on a path. He had me on this new path. And if I would have just went home, I probably would have just ended up doing the same thing over and over and over again. And, that broke my dad's heart to have to tell me that I couldn't come home. And I always think about the story of the prodigal son. And I know my dad would share with me that, he wished that he could have just let me come home, but that he had heard from the Lord, and the Lord said, no, don't let her come home. And even though my dad saw my life completely transformed and how God was working in my life and all these wonderful things that were happening in sobriety for me, he still was just like so heartbroken that he wouldn't let me come home. And I don't know, that's just meant so much to me that my dad had the courage to stand firm in what he was hearing from the Lord, even though in his heart he wanted to let me come home and he just wanted to protect me. But he stood firm, and that also saved my life. And then we met, and then we met in 2009, and we got married in 2014, and we're pretty much just living the life. I mean, we were sober, and we had great jobs, and we bought a house. We had Evelyn. We lived maybe 2 blocks from where my mom and dad lived, and barely like a mile from where Tim's grandma lived. So everything seemed really great. And it was great on the outside, and we were going to church, but we weren't really totally connected, tithing sometimes and going to church on Sundays. But that was about it. We weren't really reading our Bible or praying. I wouldn't even pray out loud. I remember being terrified to pray out loud. And so I think in a worldly view, we were doing amazing. But spiritually, we were dead. And we always felt like we were made for more. I didn't know how to get connected to that. I didn't know how to make that happen. I remember, we would sing worship in church, and I would just cry and cry and cry, and just ask God, what am I supposed to be doing? Who am I? What am I supposed to be doing? We just always had this call on our heart. We just didn't really know what it was or how to obtain it or how to get to it. We were going to a church in our neighborhood that my dad went to. We started going there because my dad got really, really sick. And I just wanted to be with him. So we were going to a church to be with my dad. And, but yeah, we just weren't connected. We knew that something was missing. Yeah,
I feel like, God had delivered us from just so many things in our life, and we kind of got sidetracked. What was important, I was after my career. We were obviously serious in our relationship. It's funny because we always joke, when we went to a foundations class, and we weren't even married yet. I think, were we even engaged? So we're in a foundations. We're planners. And it was funny, we're going over expectations, and one of Sam's expectations was that she wanted to stay at home and, raise our kids. And I'm sitting here like managing one restaurant, like barely making any money. And I'm just sitting there with a smile like, okay, like cool, but I think at that moment, God just had a smile on his face because he knew, he just sees time so quickly where we see time, it's just kind of slow moving. And so I felt at that moment that, we just kind of lost sight of, who brought us here today and who brought us there at that moment. And, which it was beautiful. I mean, we got married, we had Evelyn, and it was crazy kind of putting Hawaii into this. We went, our honeymoon was in Maui. So it was here in Hawaii. So that's kind of like our entryway to Hawaii, which was really special, and then coming back, starting our life. I think we knew that we needed to be more involved in church. We tried to hit connect groups at Ventura Missionary. We tried to get plugged in, but it just didn't really, I don't think we really just took it serious enough. And then I think it was about 2015, I got offered a job to come out here and open up the Jersey Mike's here in Hawaii. But at that time, our other daughter, Strummer, she was very young. So we decided to turn that opportunity down, which is kind of crazy now looking at that we're here. But, God tried to bring us here earlier, but obviously, I was never going to force Sam to do something that she wasn't willing to do or move away from Strummer at that moment. Mm-hmm. So,
when I think too, about how beautiful God is when it comes to nudging us to do, get on that path that he wants us on, because Hawaii was offered to us 3 times. First time, Strummer was very young, and I was like, absolutely not. We are not moving to Hawaii. No way. Then the second time, again, I was like, absolutely not. I'm not moving to Hawaii. God's like, no, yes, you are. And then the third time, I really felt like that was a time when I knew that we were called to more. I just didn't know what it was. And so Tim had come home one night and said, they brought up Hawaii again. And, but I know that we shouldn't go or whatever. And I thought, I really felt on my heart, I really felt the Lord tell me, you need to honor your husband. This is not about you. You need to honor your husband. And then out of my mouth was, maybe you should set up that meeting and just kind of find out what it's about. And I'm like, why am I saying this?
Well, yeah, and inside, I'm so happy. I mean, I started Jersey Mike's when I was, right around 17. It's been my dream to own stores, own Jersey Mike's. So at that moment, I was taken back, wait, did you really say that? Wait.
I was even like, did I really just say that? Yeah. And so that was June of 2020 that I said that. And we were moved here September of 2020. That's how fast God just moved. So we got here September 16th of 2020, a little tiny pod, and we didn't know anybody. I think maybe we knew one person. A pastor that we knew from Ventura Missionary was living here at the time, but that was it. No church family, no friends, nothing. That was a really difficult time. It happened really, really fast. My oldest daughter ended up staying on the mainland, and that really affected me. And even though, like I said, that, we're Christians, we were not connected to God's word or to the Lord. And it was right in the middle of the pandemic, and everybody is on lockdown. And I feel like I really went into a super dark place at that time. Just, leaving family, leaving my oldest daughter. The enemy just really used that against me. There was a lot of guilt and shame, a lot of change at one time. And it was just pretty dark. It turned into a pretty dark time for me. And for about a year, I just went into a really bad depression. I was having panic attacks almost on a daily basis. And, there was a time when I allowed the enemy to really sow lies into my heart. And I really started believing those lies. I started believing that, I wasn't a good mom and this was a mistake and we should have never come here. And, just all these lies, that turned into your family would be better off without you. You're just holding your husband back. Just a lot of ugly lies. And I started believing them to the point where mid-2021, I started thinking about taking my own life. And we had tried some churches and we just didn't feel connected. And I started thinking, this is dumb. We're never going to find a church. And I'm just going to be alone here. Tim had his career, his dreams had come true with the business. And I just felt lost. I was so lost. And there was a morning when I went out on a hike and I just thought, gosh, I just shouldn't be here anymore. It would just be so much better if I wasn't here anymore. And again, in that moment, God showed up. He showed up. And he called me. He said, don't do that. And quickly I was reminded by him of who I am. That I'm loved. That I am a good mom. I'm a good wife. And that I belong to him. I don't belong to the enemy. I belong to him. And I went home. And for the first time, I opened my Bible. And I just started reading. It didn't matter what I was reading, because every time I opened that Bible, God was talking to me. And he was reminding me of who I am. And that I'm important. And that I am called. And that I do have a purpose. And that was the time, right around that time, I think Tim was really starting to notice that I was really, really struggling. And I hadn't shared with him about contemplating suicide. I was just kind of dealing with all of that inside on my own. Isolating, which is exactly where all of that ugliness festers and grows, is when I'm isolating myself. And randomly, Tim found Anchor online, and it talked about Splendor. And, he said we should go up there and we should check it out. I didn't want to. I just thought this is just going to be another church, and I'm going to feel rejected, or I'm just not going to feel connected. I'm going to feel disappointed, and that's just going to hurt more. And Tim convinced me that, no, there's Christmas lights and we should go up there. We should just go check it out. So I said, okay, for Evelyn. I wanted her to see the lights. And we drove up the driveway. And it's interesting because Pastor Rob always talks about that. You drive up that driveway, right? You drive up that driveway one way and you drive back down another way. And that was literally our experience. We came up the driveway, and instantly I felt the Holy Spirit. Instantly, I felt something different here. And we walked around, and when it was time for service, the first person that I met was Pastor Tammy. And she just walked right up to me like she had known me my whole life and hugged me and said, hello, beautiful. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see you. And I'm like, do I know this lady? And she just hugged me. And we walked into service, and the Holy Spirit was just talking. He was just talking to my soul the whole time, just confirming that it was going to be okay and that we were home. And we've been here ever since. That was December of 2021.
Yeah, and just talking and just kind of piggybacking off what Sam said about the church, just driving up the driveway, and I know Pastor Rob says this, but it's really true. It's like you drive up that driveway one person and you drive back down a whole new person. Just the feeling you get on campus. I still remember the first day that we came on, you just feel this weight lifted. Obviously, being the man of the household and noticing your wife is struggling, and we had prior some discussions about possibly Evelyn and Sam moving back to California and me staying here and running the business, and that reality just scared me so much, because we had moved here to obviously to have a career and get ownership of these stores, but it was more or less to have a better relationship with my daughter and my wife and be present in the household. Prior in California, I had traveled so much around the state, and I had so many stores that I was rarely home before 8, 9 o'clock. I would see my daughter on the weekends, and it was just this reality where we came here, and to have that as an answer was just so scared. So coming up here and feeling that weight lifted and seeing that weight lifted off of Samantha's shoulders was just amazing. And then when you walk on, it's like everybody here at the church, they make you feel a part of the family, like you have been going there, so they're greeting you, they're welcoming you. And then just hearing Pastor Rob's message that night was just amazing. I mean, I looked over and I could just see a difference in my wife's face and just her body expressions. I don't know if anybody's watched somebody have a panic attack. I've personally never really had them, but just to watch her in some of those moments was really scary. And I knew deep down inside, if God had delivered me from my addiction and my disease, he could do this. This would be an easy step for him, And so when I found this church, or when we found this church, and Pastor Rob, I even remember being out on the courtyard, and Pastor Rob came right up to us, and he greeted us. He introduced himself, and I think it was only like 3 weeks later, he's like, "Hey, you guys want to be in our Connect group?" And we're just like, "Us?" Like the pastor of the church? Like, I don't know. God was just so good, and he connected us with an amazing Connect group. Pastor Rob, and we have so many friends in that Connect group. And fast forward, like a couple of our friends, Jim and Diane, we grew up in the same Catholic church, me and Jim. So he went to St. Mary Magdalene, and so did I. And it was just crazy.
And I grew up in Ventura, and she grew up in Ventura.
Yeah.
And we met in our Connect group. We were introducing ourselves like, "Hey, we're Tim and Sam from Camarillo and Ventura." And Jim and Diane were like, "Wait, we're Jim and Diane from Camarillo, Ventura." We're like, "What?"
Yeah, so just how God moved, and that truth just rings to us. Like, we are so grateful, and we never lost that. When we went back down that driveway that night, and just the coming weeks, like, we felt called. We felt like we had a purpose, and everybody challenged us to get involved. And that's like, even in our Connect group, I think the kids ministry was like, "Hey," but Pastor Rob's like, "Hey, somebody needs a cover in kids ministry this weekend." I'm like, "Oh, we'll do it." Yeah. And Sam looks at me, and we've been serving there for almost 3 years now, and we just put one foot in front of the other and just got plugged in, and just watching God move, and just to see Evelyn, our daughter, grow up. And even when Strummer lived with us for a little bit, like, it's just an amazing place to raise your kids and to bring them here. Like, I don't know what they call it, the young people's group on Wednesday nights, youth group. that just did so much for our oldest daughter. And we're just so grateful to be a part of this church and just living out like what the mission statement is of this church. Like, you scroll and what Pastor Rob says their mission is, like, that's real. That's like a real thing for us in our life. And we're so grateful. I mean, we are all in, like we've been changed and moved, and, we would do anything for this church.
Yeah. The first thing we did was we did everything that was suggested pretty much, like do what's called Discover More now. But we did that. And then I got connected with Pastor Tammy. She made some time for me, and we went and had coffee, and we were talking. This was when we just barely started coming here. And this is how amazing God is. And he works in such fun ways. I was having coffee with Pastor Tammy and asking her, like, where can I get connected? I need to be connected, like, with other moms. And she started telling me about Anchor Moms. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's perfect. Yes, I want to do that. She's like, okay, so I'm going to send Nicole an email and I'm going to get you guys connected. And then all of a sudden she looks past me and she goes, wait, there's Nicole right now. And Nicole was literally walking up right in that moment. And so I was able to meet Nicole like right then and there, right when Pastor Tammy was telling me about her. And so I started Anchor Moms. I started attending Anchor Moms right away. And that was such a game changer for me, just to have a safe space with other women, and to be able to just be absolutely transparent about what was going on in my life. And, just getting prayed for by them, and also praying for the other moms. Yeah, so Anchor Moms has been such an amazing thing for me. And then Celebrate Recovery. We didn't even know. I was telling Tim, like, man, I really wish there was like an AA version or like a Christian AA version, of recovery. And well, there is. It's called Celebrate Recovery. And I didn't really know that. And lo and behold, there's Celebrate Recovery right here on the campus. Yep. So God just kept showing up and putting things in front of us, and we just would say yes and say yes and say yes. And I just hope that, his yes and my yes continue to align, and I keep saying yes to him, because I am absolutely transformed. I don't really have panic attacks anymore. I haven't had one in, I don't even remember, months now. And so I've been delivered of the anxiety and just the fear and the guilt and the shame that I came with. I don't believe those things anymore. I don't believe those lies anymore. I've been reminded by our living God of who I really am. And I know that I have a calling now. I know that I have a purpose. And Anchor really helped launch that for me and for Tim and our marriage.
Yeah.
And us as a family unit.
Some of the things that reminded us of, like, we're supposed to be here. I mean, with our Connect group with Ed. So like in our Connect group, from us sharing our story and being, forthcoming about our addictions and everything, our friend Ed was able to come forward as well and be delivered from his addictions too. So these are like divine appointments that, like, we really feel strongly that, God brought us here for a reason. And we're here on purpose for a purpose. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not Jersey Mike's. Originally, we would always say, like, oh, we came to Hawaii for Jersey Mike's, but nope, no way.
That was just the platform.
That was just the platform. We came to Hawaii to do God's work, to be involved here at Anchor and to share our story and continue to use our story to help other people that are going through similar things, and show them that, you put your life and your trust in Jesus' hands, and you make him your Lord and Savior, and he'll do amazing miracles in your life. I'm in a miracle, right? Like, just to sum up, I'm a high school dropout Christian, and I'm here part owner of Jersey Mike's, and people look at me and like, what, you don't have a diploma, or you're not like a business major? Nope, the Lord just keeps blessing me, so.